Hi, my name is Monty.
And I'm Linda, and this is our story.
It's been very evident that God has been in charge of our story from the very beginning. He is sovereign, He's in total control. He knows all the details, and He also cares about all those details and cares about us and our family. And that's been just extremely clear from the very beginning, and especially as it relates to the birth of our son, Cameron.
It happened very quickly. We're not even to this day really sure what happened, but again, God knows. Cameron was born that night, and we didn't get to see him. They took him to the nursery right away, and the doctors were all trying to figure out what was going on with him because they knew something was wrong with him, but they didn't quite know what. He was the only one in the nursery that night, and throughout the night, you could hear the calls over the intercom calling for code blue, respiratory. And at that time, all I could do was pray. And in the morning, the only thing that they could come up with was that at some point, he had an insult to his brain. And everything was there normal. It's just that the part of the brain that tells you to swallow was not telling him to swallow, which is a pretty big thing, is to be able to swallow. You don't even think about it. So that was pretty much his main issue at the time. And so it was necessary for them to perform what they call a Nissen fundoplication, to be able to put a feeding tube in so he could eat, and then also to try to keep food and things from aspirating into his lungs. And so he had a surgery to do that when he was 7 days old. And then we, at that point, had to learn how to take care of him. He was in the hospital there for about a month. You know, I felt like, I don't know that I can do this. But God reminded me that I could. I can do all things through Christ.
We could never have imagined what was in store, what was going to happen with Cameron's life, in and out of hospital stays, doctor visits on the regular, surgeries and all that is entailed with surgeries and recovering from those surgeries. And I know when he was about 9 months old, he had to be life flighted. And so we had to take him to the emergency room. He ended up in an oxygen tent. Watched my wife crawl right up in there with him. And then he ended up being life flighted to Minneapolis Children's. And so we had to drive. We couldn't fly with them. We had to drive across northern Wisconsin, about a 6 or 7 hour drive. And I just remember even on that trip, thinking, we didn't know if he was going to be alive when we got there. We didn't know how he was going to be doing, but just trusting the Lord in that moment, God was in control and God was going to use it however.
We ended up moving to North Carolina. It was on his, now it probably would have been like his 9th or 10th surgery on his GI, on his stomach, that they started telling us to start thinking about how we would want Cameron to die. Which that was pretty hard to think about. I mean, you always realize that he's very fragile. His life is very fragile. And you just take it day to day.
That was kind of a turning point, I guess, in how we were thinking too, even though, like Linda said, we know that he's been fragile from day one. But hearing that especially after all the surgeries had gone through, hearing that really, I guess, solidified in our minds the whole idea of, we're just going to trust the Lord with this. We don't know, again, what a day is going to bring forth, but we're just going to trust the Lord along the way.
And every time when they would ask us, when he would get in a very serious situation, do you want us to do everything we can to keep him alive? And we would say yes. And they would look at you like, really? Because his life, he really doesn't have much. But again, we said yes, definitely do all you can, because again, that's not for us to decide. It's for God alone. He's a giver of his life. And if he wants to continue his life, then he'll keep him alive. And we just pray and ask God to give us wisdom in making the right choices for him.
Cameron's life is precious, just like any child's life is. And God has taken something that, from man's perspective, is difficult or bad, or maybe even some would say his life, something went wrong. And he's used that in so many good ways to allow us to grow spiritually, but also for us to reach out to other people in certain situations or in similar situations that we never would have met. We've been able to meet doctors and nurses and even share the message of Jesus Christ with them that we never would have met if it weren't for Cameron. And I know that there will be a day in heaven that maybe we'll see some of those things. We don't see those things now, but God is using his life even now in ways that we don't even realize. And so again, it kind of goes back to the fact that God is in control. God knows, God cares, and God is using his life even right now. I'm convinced of it. He's using Cameron's life even right now in ways that we aren't even aware of, that we may never know about until we get to eternity and see the lives that were impacted because of his situation. And so that to me is super encouraging. And that's why we look at Cameron's life and say, we don't want to just survive this. We don't want to just get along and limp along and woe is us and our life is difficult and wow, this is hard. We don't want to live that way. We want to live a life where we thrive in this because of the message of the gospel, because of what God can take in a life like this and use it for big time good for all eternity.